Hello friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. My friend over in the UK, a subscriber named Curtis, had a question for me regarding something I had never heard about, or at least not heard it expressed this way, and he called it aquarium dust. He wanted to know how to get rid of aquarium dust. Let's go ahead and get into it right now. If you're new to the channel and you like to always be learning about how to take better care of our aquariums and fish, consider hitting that sub button and the bell and the thumbs up, and that lets YouTube know that something good is going on here and encourages YouTube to put the channel in front of other fish keepers like you and me. So I appreciate those of you who have done that, and if you'll do it, thank you so much for that. So let me just go ahead and read, and I'll put it right here, and I'll read the comment that was made by Curtis. He says, hi Ben, great videos always. What an absolutely amazing fish room you have. It was a comment under a fish room walkthrough that I did. I would love nothing more than to live near your fish room. Some of those fish are quite possibly the most colorful I've seen in a very long time. One question, how do you get your water so clear? I keep on top of my water changes and I'm struggling with aquarium dust in the water, and could there be any possibility of doing a short video on aquarium dust in water, as there just aren't any videos out there on this. Thank you so much, Ben, from the UK. So Curtis is in the United Kingdom, and Curtis, thank you for asking me that question. And I have talked about something like this in prior videos. I think one of them was floating in air, or comments like that, like crystal clear water. I think I have several videos. If you look at on my playlists, you'll find them. But let me address this specific thing of aquarium dust. And I know what you're talking about. It's just that those particles that just never seem to go away no matter what you do. I'll go ahead and share with you what I do to help with that. And what I did is, and for those of you familiar with my channel know how I do this pretty routinely, is I put together a little cheat sheet, a little list here of things that I wanted to make sure that I touch on, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to add more to it, but I have about 5 of them here. And the first one that is, I think, important is food, and two aspects of the food. One, make sure that the food doesn't have additives, a lot of preservatives, a lot of binding agents, things that are not necessarily going to be providing any nutrition to your fish, and are ultimately going to end up just sort of floating around your tank. You have the quality of food. That's an important aspect. And you can try a few foods, buy a few different kinds of foods and test them in your tank and see if one of them does seem to leave a bit of a cloudiness that might seem to clear up after a little while, but very often what that cloudiness does is it just settles on the bottom and then can get stirred up by fish, especially if you have fish that like to sift the sand, like cichlids, geophagus, things like that. And so it'll get stirred up. It'll get stirred up by wave makers, things like that. So, and also the amount of food. Perhaps if you're feeding a little bit too much and the fish can't quite consume it all, and some of it is getting lodged between decor, in back corners, inside of plants, and then that slowly is dissolving and adding dust to the aquarium. So just something to keep in mind. The amount of food, how you're feeding them, make sure you're feeding them so that they can get to it. Don't feed them over an area in the tank where the food will immediately lodge itself between objects in the tank, inside of a plant or things of that, where the fish are not going to be able to get to it. And so feed them in a wide open area and be sure that you're not overfeeding them. Be sure that they can get to all the food. So quality of food and volume and how you're feeding the fish, where in the tank and if they're getting to the food, all of those play a role with regards to is the food contributing to the dust in the tank. I personally, I like to use, of course, as you know, Sarah, good quality food, leaves no dust in the tank, and Extreme is great and disappears entirely immediately after the feeding, and Piscine Energetics, same thing, just disappears entirely. And so these are good quality foods, a little bit on the higher end price wise, but you'll be glad you're using them. The other point that's important is filtration, and by that what I mean is adequate filtration. Be sure you have enough filtration for the tank, and certainly if I had a lot of dust going on, I would perhaps start to rethink my setup, my filtration setup. Do I have enough, and also do you have enough turnover? Now let me elaborate on those points. With filtration, you want to have, in my opinion, between 5 to 10 times turnover in the aquarium. In other words, run 5 times the volume of the tank through filter media an hour. So a 50-gallon tank should have, after adjusted for slowdowns and head pressure, from tubes going up in a sump, for example, or how gallons per hour reduces in most filters when you add media, right? It slows the water flow down. So you have to take those things into consideration. But a 50-gallon tank, I should be doing about a 500-gallon per hour turnover. So the filter I'm using, or the combination of filters, should be anywhere from, I think maybe 300, maybe 250 to 500. Okay, so you get 5 to 10 times the turnover. Now, that's not going to be possible with some fish. There are some fish that are very, like your bettas, your discus. You can't have a tremendous amount of water movement in those aquariums because it's just very uncomfortable for them, very much not what they like to live in. They don't like to be blown around by powerful outputs, and you'll find that aquariums that have those kinds of fish, even guppies with a lot of broad fins and things like that, aquariums that have powerful outputs, wave makers, power heads, those fish are going to be congregating, right? They're going to be hanging out in the areas of the tank that are outside of that flow. Now, some fish like the flow. I've had fish that love swimming directly into the flow, right? Clown loaches, some cichlids, they're kind of funny that way, but you got to keep that in mind. So water turnover. Also, are your filters set up correctly and optimally? And by that what I mean is, are you really pulling all the particles out of the water with a coarse sponge, medium sponge, fine sponge, and possibly a floss, like pinky floss or crib batting, in that order, really getting the big particles, the medium sized fine particles, and then running the cleanest possible water over your biological media, right? Whether it's ceramic or glass rings or whatever it is you're using, BioHome, Sarah, Saparix, or whatever you're using for your biomedia, right? Now, some will argue that the sponges are the biomedia, and in my case, I do use sponges for my biomedia. So, but work them in a direction of coarse, medium, fine, and then perhaps some type of a floss to capture the small particles. And that will help to ensure that what goes back to the tank is as clean as possible. And also, the water that is flowing over your bio is not going to be mucked up and then clog up your biological media. So the other tip that I'll give you in that topic is the use of wave makers. Now again, some tanks you can't use wave makers because you have fish that don't like that. Again, betta, discus, like fish like that. But For example, in this 210 behind me, I have a 3,500 gallon per hour wave maker. And that wave maker is on a timer, so the fish aren't being blasted 24/7. It's off, from 10 p.m. so they can all chill and relax and not be blown around. But it does come on for several hours during the day, and what it does is it kicks up any particles that may have settled into the substrate and blows them towards filter intakes, whether it's the FX6 back here with the sponge pre-filter, or the Geyer, the overflow of the overflow, the input of the overflow box in the back of the aquarium. So moving or doing a forced water vacuuming, if you will. I vacuum this tank very rarely, only because I have like spots, sort of like cold spots or very little water movement spots in the aquarium, like under decor, around decor, where the wave maker can't really blow the detritus up. So maybe, I don't know, maybe once a month or every 2 months or so, I'll get in there with a siphon and really fine clean the substrate. Maybe do a very light half-inch raking of the sand just to stir up some stuff, and then. But otherwise I leave it alone. I don't vacuum this tank. I simply do water changes every week, and it seems to work out okay. Now, so using your wave makers or power heads as a way of suspending waste so that the filters can grab it, and assuming your filters are set up correctly, right? Number 3, the use of chemical filtration. Now, once I have a tank established, I don't use chemical filtration. Maybe in the first few months, maybe I'll throw a bag of Purgen in there, Seachem Purgen, or maybe ChemiPure Blue. ChemiPure Blue is good for cichlids. ChemiPure Green, if you have plants, works well. And what those are like a synthetic product that absorbs fine particles, absorbs a tremendous amount of fine particles, binds to them, and removes them from the aquarium. After a while, they do need to be thrown out, just like your activated carbon. They have to be thrown out, or in the case of Purgen, Seachem Purgen, you can recharge. You can recharge it using a series of steps that include bleach and water conditioner and things like that. That makes it safe again. And I've recharged it as much as 8 times and gotten a long life out of Purgen. So I think it's a pretty good bargain, actually. So another product to consider adding, and this I guess will be point number 4, another a product to consider adding is floss, whether it's a pinky floss, or you can also get a hold of crib batting, which is just a very fine floss, like a polyfill is one of the commercial names it's offered under. Just be sure it's not flame retardant or treated in any way at all. If it says on there that it's treated in some way, it's flame retardant, it's this or that, don't buy it. Buy just plain, untreated crib batting. You can go to any fabric store and buy polyfill. I stopped using it because it tended to break apart and put these real fine little white hairs into the sponges, which were impossible to remove for me. But when I did use it, the times I did use it, I found that it was effective at trapping the fine particles. So that's another way of working with it. I like pinky floss. It's very easy to use. You cut it to the shape and size that you want, and I use it in the cartridges that are currently being used in the Marineland hang-on back filters. I just put a piece of pinky floss in there, and it does a tremendous job. Just be sure that the water is hitting the white side first, and then the pink, so it goes from coarse to fine, and it will do a wonderful job cleaning out your tank. And then after the tank has become more established, you can stop using pinky floss. You can use something like a reusable sponge. You can cut a reusable sponge and put that inside of the cartridge or inside of your hang-on back filter, and then just simply rinse it in tank water every time you do maintenance on the filter. And that way you don't have to keep buying pinky floss, and you certainly don't need to keep buying the factory recommended cartridges, which can get very expensive. Point number 5, be making sure that your maintenance is really dialed in. And some tanks, depending on how much you're feeding, how many fish you have in the tank, right, your stock level, the size of the fish, right, the size of the tank, things of this nature. Each tank has its own requirements with regards to filtration, and you need to get a feel for how often do I need to work on this tank, and then really stick to that schedule, keeping in mind that that schedule can change. Perhaps you reduce the number of fish, or you increase the number of fish, or over time those fish grow and need more food, or maybe you've cut back on one of the filters, you're no longer using one hang-on back or a canister, you've stopped using it. And so again, it's a fluid situation, as I like to say, so just keep that in mind. It's not all in stone. However, if you do too little, you're going to find that you're not going to get the results you want. So perhaps if you are doing water changes and vacuuming and things of this nature, or you're servicing your filters once every few months, maybe you need to cut that back. Maybe you need to do a couple water changes, or maybe vacuum a little bit more frequently, or service your filters a bit more frequently until you see the results that you're looking for in the aquarium. Now, that being said, you can be messing with it too much. And by messing with it too much, stirring things up in the aquarium. Every time you go in there and you mess with the substrate, you're going to kick stuff up into the water column, and you're going to create aquarium dust. Every time you mess with filter, there's going to be some residual that comes out of tubes, and you're going to create some cloudiness. And so you can also be messing with things too much. You can kill off perhaps some of your bacteria, and then create a bacteria bloom in the aquarium because you're messing with it too much. So again, this is what I mean by dial in your maintenance, so that you're doing it to the point where, with all factors considered, right? Number of fish, size of fish, amount of feeding, everything considered, it's dialed in for your tank and giving you the results that you're looking for, which in this case, we're talking about crystal clear water where the fish they look like they're floating in air. That's what we're looking for, right? Unless you have a brackish tank, right? So yes, you can do too much on maintenance, and that can also contribute to dust in the tank. So what do you think? What are your thoughts? What do you think creates a dusty tank that for whatever reason doesn't clear up? Comment below what you think about that, and also what you've done to really clear up your tank and get it so that your fish are floating in air. All right, let's help Curtis out, and let's give him some tips. We all learn from each other at this channel, so your input is valuable. I learn as much from you as you learn from me. Believe me when I say that, especially as I venture out into other projects like South and Central American cichlids, planted tanks, and things of this nature. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope to see you on Saturday at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream, unless noted or advertised differently. It's normally at 11 a.m. Central Time, and that's noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Great group of fish keepers getting into a lot of different subjects. If you'd like to support the channel, certainly subscribe and hit the notification bell. And one other thing you can do is become a Patreon, and that's where you become a member of the Garage Gang and commit to a monthly support amount anywhere from $3 on up, and it really helps the continual build out of the fish room and all the other different projects that I have going on. All right, thank you, my friends. You are the best, you rock, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.